Welcome to World News by Denis Halandzovskyi. If you appreciate calm, fact-based, and analytical reporting on global developments, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts. Today we examine a major emerging debate in Europe, whether the vast sums of frozen Russian assets should be used to help Ukraine, and what that means for diplomacy, international law, and the future of European security. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Western countries, particularly in Europe, froze an unprecedented amount of Russian state and private assets. These include central bank reserves, sovereign wealth funds, corporate holdings, and financial instruments that were seized or immobilized under sanctions designed to pressure the Kremlin's economy and limit its ability to finance the war. The scale is historic. Hundreds of billions of dollars are now effectively held in European banks, central banks, and international financial institutions. These funds are a direct result of coordinated sanctions imposed in response to Russia's aggression. Initially, freezing these assets was intended to signal economic pressure to isolate Russia financially and weaken its long-term ability to wage war. But as the war grinds on and Ukraine faces both battlefield and reconstruction challenges, voices across Europe have begun asking a pressing question: should some of these frozen assets be repurposed legally, politically, and ethically to directly support Ukraine's defense and recovery? Supporters of this idea point to the ongoing human and material cost of the war. Ukraine has suffered enormous infrastructure destruction, humanitarian crises, and economic collapse in occupied regions. Proponents argue that frozen Russian assets could be a source of critical funding for military aid, economic stabilization, rebuilding cities, and compensating victims of aggression. Several European leaders, particularly from Eastern and Central European states closest to the conflict, have voiced public support for this approach. They argue that, since these assets were originally Russian state holdings amassed over decades, repurposing them would be an appropriate form of accountability for starting and sustaining an illegal invasion. Despite growing support, there are significant obstacles. First is the legal dimension. Many of the frozen assets were seized under specific sanction regimes that included precise legal frameworks for how they can be held, managed, or released. Turning these funds into direct compensation or reconstruction financing would require complex legislative changes, not only within individual European states, but also at the level of the European Union and international financial law. Legal scholars warn that unilateral decisions could be challenged in courts, including international tribunals. Second is the political opposition in some Western capitals. Countries with more cautious approaches to sanctions fear that using frozen assets, particularly central bank reserves, could undermine long-term confidence in global financial systems. Foreign investment and sovereign asset holdings depend on predictable legal protections. If these can be repurposed, other states may view their overseas reserves as vulnerable. This, critics argue, could have unintended consequences for financial stability. Third, some European leaders are wary of escalating tensions with Russia. Although the Kremlin is already isolated and sanctioned, using frozen assets could be interpreted as a further step toward economic expropriation, a move that might harden Russia's negotiating positions rather than encourage diplomatic compromise. Despite these concerns, the moral argument remains powerful. Advocates argue that Russia's actions have caused immense human suffering and that it is both just and practical to leverage the financial consequences of aggression to support victims and to deter future invasions. Finally, the debate also plays into wider questions about the future of European security architecture. If European states decide to repurpose frozen assets, they will be making a bold statement about collective responsibility, shared risk, and the prioritization of security over financial orthodoxy. How this debate unfolds could shape European policy for decades, influencing not only the future of Ukraine, but the role of sanctions as a tool of international order. Thank you for watching this report on World News by Denis Halandzovskyi. If you found this analysis informative, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your perspective. Independent reporting and thoughtful discussion help us all make sense of critical global developments. Stay informed and see you in the next update.